There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
For the past 4 episodes, we've learned about Charles Darwin and some of the events that led up to the release of his book on the origin of species in 1859. Now, that's a very long time ago, over 150 years, and you might be wondering, why exactly does this matter? Setting aside the controversy when it comes to the creation of life and the origin of man, what was it that Darwin said that was so mind-blowingly innovative that you could fill a library with the books and the articles that preceded it? We can't cover it all in the span of one episode. The mechanics of it all, the stuff that Darwin didn't know and that was discovered to support his theory, all of that will come later. Today, I want to focus on what he did know and what it is that he told us in 1859. We'll do that and a little bit more in today's Evolution Talk. That's a debate hall. It could be any debate hall on pretty much any college campus or professional society. Probably more than any other subject over the last 150 plus years, there is one which has caused its advocates and its detractors to butt heads, often with incredulity at their opponent's stance and sometimes with animosity. That subject, of course, is evolution. More specifically, evolution by natural selection, as was brought to the world stage by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. The two men didn't collaborate on their theory, but they arrived at the idea of it and its implications at pretty much the same time. Evolution by natural selection. What exactly does that mean? Evolution is an easy one. We use the word evolve quite a lot. We say that ideas evolve. We say that our understanding of nature evolves. We also say that the design of cars has evolved over the years. For something to evolve means that it has changed, preferably for the better, but not always. If we take a look at the first car, arguably the Benz in 1894, or the first commercially produced automobile, the Ford Model T in 1908, and they look a whole lot different from today's Ford models. Set Carl Benz's first working prototype next to a Prius, and they are both recognizable as motor vehicles, but just barely recognizable as being of the same type of device. Between the two, models and manufacturers have come and gone. Some models did little to move the industry forward, and some can even be said to have set it back a few years. There are some models that most of us, aside from some car aficionados, have never heard of. And then there are those that have lasted and changed very little over the years, like the Volkswagen. While they have changed, I am sure that the inventor of the original Volkswagen would still recognize one today as being a descendant of his own. So we can easily say that the automobile has evolved from its early models that chugged along the country lanes all the way to the NASCARs that fly around the tracks today. We can even see the progress, even in current models that are separated by only a few years. Many of today's cars roll off the assembly line with GPS units installed. Depending on the model, they vary slightly in appearance and in function year after year, and even the colors of cars have changed. When Ford rolled out the very first Model T, he famously said when asked what color choices were available,
"You can have any color you want as long as it's black."
So why do we see these little changes in shape and form from year to year? It's because car companies take into account what sells. It's all about what the customers want. Tweak a headlight design or tweak the front grille, sell a few more cars because of it, and it becomes a permanent part of the design, at least for a few more years. If a certain stereo system or iPhone holder pleases its customers, you'll see those features propagate across the industry. That's selection. It's selection driven by the buying public. Car features and designs are driven by market selection. You can apply this concept to almost anything, from phones to blenders. Set all of the models that have been created over the years next to one another, and you will see the progression, the tests, the failures, and the features which have lasted. And that is what Darwin found in nature. That is what he meant by natural selection when it came time to explain how organisms have evolved. It's not that much different from the automobile, but instead of the buying public determining the direction of change, nature is doing it. Darwin recognized why things change over time, the driving engine behind it. He just didn't know the how or the minutia of the mechanics involved. I know I need to feed my car gas for it to run, and I understand the engine causes it to move forward, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how it all works. Open the hood and I'm pretty much lost. So what did Darwin do in his book? What he did was he outlined the process of change. He collected facts and he began to connect the dots. He drew inferences from the data and sought to put it all together into one overarching theory that would explain why there isn't just one species of bird or fish or bear, but many. He didn't address them all, of course, but his theory did. It could be applied to every living creature on the planet, from the smallest blade of grass to the largest whale. And yes, even to man. From the earliest form of life to the most complex, he outlined a process of change. Change which caused organisms to evolve, and the selection process which chose what features lasted and which ones were discarded. Sometimes the discarding process discarded an entire species. Then it is said to have become extinct, much like the Ford Edsel or even the biplane. So what are the facts that Darwin collected in nature to support his theory? There are two of them that stand out at first. Fact number one is that for a species to survive, it needs to have the ability to reproduce, and that if its offspring continues the process, the population will grow. Easy enough, right? There's not much to dispute there. Animals, fertile animals, reproduce and their offspring reproduces. If left unchecked, they will multiply and grow in numbers. Think of rabbits. Rabbits have large litters. They can have as many as 11 babies in a litter. Imagine a pair of rabbits left alone in a field with nothing to stop them or their children from reproducing. That would be a lot of rabbits. So that's fact number one. Animals reproduce, and this allows their species to grow. Fact number two is that resources are limited. There isn't enough food to go around when animals continue to reproduce. Think of the rabbits in the field. As they grow in number, which they will do quickly, the availability of grass to eat will diminish as the population expands. There may be trees around with nice green leaves to eat, but the rabbits can't reach them, so they're stuck with the grass for as long as it lasts and for as long as it can support the growing population. So we have two facts now. Animals reproduce, and resources are limited. With limited resources and a bunch of hungry rabbits, what do you think happens next? They'll struggle, right? All organisms have a survival instinct. They won't be content to just sit around and starve. If there's a blade of grass available, they'll go for it. But so will their neighbor. Whoever gets there first, whoever is the fastest, will be the lucky recipient of lunch. Now, the struggle for survival is an inference. We can't quite call it a fact, but we can see it happen, and we can infer that if there are limited food sources available, then organisms or animals will fight for those food sources. There are two more facts that can apply to this scenario, and these are key. One is that every rabbit produced will be slightly different from one another. As you're well aware, reproduction does not produce duplicates. Even identical twins have differences. They may be hard to see, but those differences are there. It's why you can walk through a crowded room and recognize a face. We are all different. Now, I run on a daily basis, but I would never consider myself fast. My son is. He can run circles around me. He's built different than I am. His legs are a bit longer, and he gets that from his mother's side. Which brings me to the other key fact. Most features, like my son's legs, are inheritable. Like I said, he gets them from his mother's side. And I'm built a lot like my own father. My eyes, though, I get these from my mother. And when my brother and I enter a room, there can be no mistake that we are brothers. We're not identical. There's 2 years separating us, but we've inherited enough of our father's traits that there's no mistake that we are related. And if you were to walk through the field of rabbits, you would see many variations in color, in size, and in speed. Now, Now, from all of this, we can come to the same conclusions that Darwin did in his book. Remember, we have a lot of rabbits running around and limited resources. Those rabbits who are slower or smaller may have a more difficult time getting to the food. They'll be pushed aside by their larger and faster neighbors. And some are so large, in fact, that they're able, when they sit up on their hind legs, to reach some of the low-hanging leaves. This is a whole new food source and one that the smaller rabbits can't reach. And in time, those small rabbits will find that they are unable to compete for the grass on the ground, and they certainly can't reach the low-hanging leaves. So they begin to starve. Their ability to reproduce is hampered. Some die before they can even reproduce, but the larger ones, those rabbits are having a grand old time of things. They're able to push the smaller ones aside for the grass, and they're able to rear up on their hind legs to get to the leaves. Their bellies are full, and as a result, they live longer and they reproduce more. And what do they produce? More rabbits, of course, but their offspring will inherit their parents' traits. Some will inherit the fast genes, some will inherit the genes that allow them to grow larger, and some will inherit both. Now, what do you think we would see if we were to step away for a few months and to then come back? More than likely, we would see that almost all of the rabbits are able to reach the leaves now, and those smaller rabbits are gone. They were weeded out by the simple fact that they could not compete for the resources around. That's natural selection. Nobody picked which traits provided the most benefits, nature did. It's an endless struggle to survive and to reproduce, and if one little variation provides a benefit and that benefit allows its owner to survive longer and to reproduce more, eventually that variation will spread through the population. Just like we see with our large rabbits. The kicker is that, now that they are all large and fast, they are no better off than when they were all small. Now everyone can reach the leaves, and these leaves are disappearing fast. There is another level of leaves that they just can't reach. But wait, there's one rabbit that you see who is just able to reach that second level. It's obvious that he's been doing so for a while, since his belly is a little bit fatter than the rest of those who are showing signs of starvation. That guy will be around for a while. So what do you think will happen next? Now that you can see how natural selection works in a population to produce larger rabbits, I'm going to change things up slightly. We are going to leave half of those rabbits in their original environment with the large tranquil field, the grass and the leaves, and the other half we are going to move to another environment, a dark forest. And in this forest, we are going to release some wolves. Now these two environments, the tranquil field and the dark forest, are far enough away that the rabbits will never find one another again. And now we walk away for a bit. And before you go back to check up on things, I want you to think about something. We've already seen what happens in the field. The larger rabbits were able to get to the leaves, and over time the population had a higher percentage of large rabbits. Given a little more time, they were all large, much larger than the original group of rabbits who can only eat grass. Now what about the rabbits in the forest? What do you think they would need to survive? They would probably need to be fast to avoid the wolves. They might also need to have fur, which would allow them to blend in with their surroundings, right? That would help. Perhaps they would need to be smaller in order to squeeze into safe places and to reproduce, care for their young, or to avoid being eaten. And now let's assume that all of this happened. If you were to capture a few of those forest rabbits and sit them next to their tranquil field cousins, what do you think you might see now? I would bet you would see two different species of rabbits.